So Nintendo's president and CEO Shintaro Furukawa did a New Year's interview with Japanese outlet Nikkei, and Nintendo Everything put up a full translation of this interview. It's a rather short one, but it's important when we're talking about the future of Nintendo, because this is the guy at the top of the food chain, and we really haven't heard much from him this entire past year after he took over for Kimishima, who entered a semi-retirement phase at Nintendo. And it's interesting because there's talk about the Switch, there's talk about the future of consoles, and there's also talk about how Nintendo plans to diversify their revenue. Some of this really isn't new, but it is interesting hearing some clarifications from Furukawa, including the fact that Nintendo might not always make video game systems, let alone home consoles. So let's get right into the interview. So the first question says, you put a lot of consoles and software, but there's always a really big risk that comes with it. Furukawa responds and says, we're in the entertainment industry. There isn't much we can do about that risk. To us, the guiding principle by which we operate is offering customers all around the world innovative and unique ways to play games. I don't want our developers to think too much along the lines of, what should I do if we fail? My most important role is to facilitate an environment in which they can demonstrate their own abilities. I'm not a pro developer myself, so I leave the actual development to leaders that can tell what a good game is and what isn't. And then they follow that up and say, you're completely hands-off? Furukawa responds, well, leaving everything up to others would be irresponsible. I spare a lot of time to make sure the people I leave in charge and I have a mutual understanding with regard to decisions on how we should improve our technology and the direction in which Nintendo should proceed. I base my final decisions on the development leader's way of thinking. I don't think it's a good idea to give complete freedom. I want there to be more of a balance between freedom and discipline. Then they ask, have you ever run into an innovation dilemma where the company's past successes were too big, making innovation impossible? Furukawa responds, we aren't really fixated on our consoles. At the moment, we're offering the uniquely developed Nintendo Switch and its software, and that's what we're basing how we deliver the Nintendo experience on. That being said, technology changes. We'll continue to think flexibly about how to deliver that experience as time goes on. It has been over 30 years since we started developing consoles. Nintendo's history goes back even further than that, and through all the struggles that they faced, the only thing that they thought about was what to make next. In the long term, perhaps our focus as a business could shift away from home consoles. Flexibility is just as important in ingenuity. Do you expect fluctuations in business performance to continue from here on? Furukawa responds, I'm thinking about little ways we can reduce that kind of instability. I'd like to increase the amount of games on smartphones and have a continuous stream of revenue. We're also dabbling in theme parks and movies, different ways to have our characters be a part of everyday life. I'm anticipating a strong synergy like that. So, first off, full credit to Nintendo Everything on this translation. We'll link to the original interview from Nikkei and then obviously to Nintendo Everything's translation. Brian over there does a fantastic job, and he wanted to personally thank Niku Thaxton and Oni Dino, who were the contributors who translated this post for them. So here's the big deal. There's not a lot in here we haven't heard before, but this is one of the first times we've heard them talk about, someone at Nintendo talk about a future where home consoles and potentially video games might not be part of that future, but he's talking like way long term. So he's talking about basically when the video game business is no longer viable, Nintendo needs to be prepared to shift, just like they were when they were a card and toy company. They shifted to video games. They have to be prepared for an eventuality where they have to shift again. Maybe that shift is just not making home consoles and going third party, and then eventually shifting from that into something else. He does note obviously that they're built around the Nintendo Switch. They're built around video games. This is what they do. So he's in more of a full admittance of that than, say, Kimishima, who used to say, hey, look, yeah, we're in the entertainment business, but we're not just a video game company. He's basically saying, look, this is what we do. We're a video game company, but we might not always be a video game company. And one thing he wants to do to maybe lower some of the risk in the video game sphere is obviously get more movies out and hopefully the movies are successful, and then lead that into the theme parks and all the stuff they're doing. And one thing he does note, and this is the part that I think some people are going to take issue with, is releasing more and more smartphone games that have a continuous revenue coming into Nintendo, kind of like the success they have with Fire Emblem Heroes. Fire Emblem Heroes is not like even close to their most installed game they've released, but it's by far the one that brings in the most revenue. And if every game they put out on smartphones was drawing in the revenue like Fire Emblem Heroes did, well, I mean, they would essentially be just fine with whatever fluctuations happen in the home console market. Unfortunately for Nintendo, that hasn't been the case, and some of that is because some stubbornness. Stubbornness that a lot of us appreciate, but stubbornness that hurts them for a continuous revenue stream. Because when you think about a continuous revenue stream, it's microtransactions and loot boxes. That's how you do it. That's the only way to get continuous revenue streams on smart devices, because if you do like a Super Mario Run style where you offer a one-time purchase fee, you might sell some, but it ends up not becoming that continuous revenue stream. Look at Pokemon Go and how successful that is. Microtransactions. Yeah, you could play the entire game without doing it, but a lot of people buy microtransactions in those games, and because of it, it's become a nearly $3 billion revenue game, despite being, a game that you don't have to pay a fee to play. So I think that the reality is a lot of Nintendo's games moving forward under this president on smartphones are going to have microtransactions and loot boxes and have the game built around them like pretty much all mobile games do, and that's going to be disappointing for a lot of people that were hoping for more Dragalia Lost style games, which does have microtransactions, but they're actually very non-intrusive. It's a really great game, by the way. You guys should definitely check that out on your phones. And more, less experiences like Super Mario Run and more like Fire Emblem Heroes, which is literally built around loot boxes. It's built around a gacha mechanic. So I think we're going to see more and more games like that. Does that suck in some ways? I don't know. The people that I know in my real life, forget the internet, just people I know that still play Fire Emblem Heroes, they love the way the Fire Emblem Heroes is. And I don't know if it's just because they're addicted to the loot boxes, because, that's a form of gambling in many people's opinions, so it can become addictive, or if they just really love the game for what it is, because it does have some really good gameplay. Let's not kid ourselves. Fire Emblem Heroes has some really interesting Fire Emblem-esque gameplay in it. It's awesome that way, but the entire premise of gaining characters is built around this idea of loot boxes. So I think it's a bit of a scary thought, because Nintendo's trying to think of ways to lessen the impact of the ever-fluctuating ways that their hardware and software can go. And while they're on the upswing with Switch, they're on the downswing with 3DS, so who really knows how their overall numbers are playing out but them. What I can say is this also should make people afraid, because while he doesn't bring it up, obviously one idea they could do in the future is to bring such practices into their console games. Again, he's not saying they're going to do it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you Nintendo's going to go all EA here. But it is a possible future where if they're trying to get more continuous revenue and they're failing at it in the mobile space, but they experiment with it on Switch and it does well, I mean, what's to stop them from doing it in more and more games? Thankfully, he does put a lot of the trust in what makes a good game into the hands of the developers and the hands of Miyamoto and all that stuff. And for whatever you want to think about Miyamoto's track record recently, reality is he obviously is an old school mentality that doesn't believe in those microtransactions and DLC. I mean, Super Mario Odyssey is the most successful 3D Mario game of all time, and yet it still doesn't have paid DLC, and it's still the microtransaction, the costumes, when clearly there was an easy path for microtransactions in Mario Odyssey that would not have affected gameplay, would have been strictly cosmetic, and people would have bought it up in the millions and millions of dollars worth of revenue. It's honestly a lost revenue opportunity that most people would have just dismissed as, hey, it's okay, as long as it's not something that affects gameplay. So I'm going to sit back and just relax a little bit on that point, because I don't know where Nintendo's going to go. All I know is that he's obviously looking for a way to stabilize their revenue year to year, and then so they can not only endure the lulls that happen in home consoles sometimes, but also have that constant revenue, so when they hit the highs, it's just super, super profitable, like the Wii and DS eras, because they want to get back to Wii and DS era like profitability, but they don't obviously feel like you're going to pull that off with just home consoles alone, hence the expanding into the mobile market, the expansion into theme parks, which hopefully will do well for them. I really like theme parks, and I know they're expensive, and usually a lot of people only get to go like once in their lifetime, but that's awesome. and I really hope it does well, and it's an amazing theme park that creates a constant stream of revenue. I hope they nail movies. Video game movies seem to be a little bit on the upswing lately, just a little bit on the upswing, and I'm hoping that means that Nintendo's movies, including the Mario one we know is being made right now, turns out. Now, it's funny when I say, on the upswing, and then, like the Sonic posters come out and everyone's freaking out. Who knows? Maybe it ends up being a really good movie. Detective Pikachu looks like a really good movie. So maybe Nintendo's going down the right path here. And I know it was the Pokemon Company more than Nintendo that set up Detective Pikachu. But I don't know. I'm pretty thrilled for that prospect, even if I'm a little worried that they might start to become too reliant on microtransactions and loot boxes in their mobile games, and then possibly transition that into home console to see those profitability levels like EA, Ubisoft, and Activision see. Although Activision was on a downswing last year, which is why they've lost 2 CFOs in a week, because they know the report's about to come out about their financials, and it's not going to look good, and people are going to request they get fired anyways. So they almost are best to go with no CFO until after the report comes out. But what are you going to do there? There's a reason they asked Blizzard to cut down on staff and get games out more quickly, which seems counterintuitive. So have less staff but make games faster. I mean, I think they're trying to Call of Duty Blizzard, and that's something to be worried about. I don't care about the Diablo Immortal, the mobile game, whatever. That's fine, but on the bright side, games come out quicker. On the negative side, they're going to be more buggy and not as complete and be full of microtransactions and loot boxes because they got to make as much money as they can. And you have to worry that Nintendo might not make the games come out faster, but make the games they have those mechanics built into it. Anyways, what's also interesting is he's pretty much hands off. He keeps tabs and hears feedback and gives suggestions, but he has no video game development experience. So it's really interesting to see him kind of be like this overarching overlord that just makes sure people are doing their jobs. Anyways, folks, that's going to do it. Thanks so much for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts on what Furukawa had to say down in the comments below. I am Nathaniel Rufflejans from Nintendo Prime. Be sure to enter our Nintendo Switch Super Smash Bros. Ultimate giveaway down in the description, and I will catch all of you guys in the next one.